Again, everybody, it's Lori White from the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, and welcome back. And we're thrilled today to be presenting episode number 91 of Chamber TV. And we have a fantastic guest with us today, Dr. Paula Bontempi, and she is the new Dean of the Graduate School of Oceanography at the University of Rhode Island. So Dean Bontempi, it's so great to see you. Welcome to Chamber TV.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
And I should say, welcome to Rhode Island. You are newly ensconced in the university, and I've been following you and a lot of what you've been talking about and writing about since your recent arrival on campus. So how has it been, and how are you enjoying Rhode Island?
So it's been amazing to be back. I have to say, having spent the last nearly 2 decades in Washington, D.C., coming back to Rhode Island, I'm a GSO grad, has been amazing. It's a huge change of pace, but very welcome. I've enjoyed reconnecting with the GSO family. I've enjoyed connecting with Rhode Island as a state, a place that is near and dear to my heart. And I really did miss the school. So it's changed a lot since I've been here, but I'm really happy to be back.
Fantastic. So I have to ask you about your virtual background. That is so cool. What is it?
So this is, I'll step out so you can see some of it. It is actually, I believe, a subset of a Landsat image of the Rio de la Plata estuary. And the heart is photoshopped in. NASA had its 50th anniversary Earth Day this year in April, and we made a special poster commemorating it. And actually, the woman who did it, the graphic artist, a good friend of mine, Jenny Motter, is fantastic. And she and I had both just read the same book called The Hidden Life of Trees. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's a great book, and we were inspired by the landscape. So the blue is actually water, the heart is actually drawn in, but the green is actually the landscape of the estuary. And if you go on the NASA website and you just look up Earth Day, you can see the full scale of the whole image, and it's absolutely incredibly beautiful. She did a great job with the poster.
So The Hidden Life of Trees, it sounds like a good one. Sounds
Yeah.
like something that would be nice to read when you're trying to go to sleep. Nothing totally scary or provocative or sad or
No,
terribly engaging so that you can't fall asleep. That sounds good.
No, it's funny. My husband said to me a while ago, and I mean no disrespect or commentary with this, but my nightstand used to be like books that were driven to help me understand the world. And it would be like a history of Islam, and he would be like, why don't you think about reading something a little bit more light when you go to sleep? And so The Hidden Life of Trees is one I picked up after that, which was a little more journey-like and a little less intense about, world history and how we got where we are in many conflicts. So yeah, it's a good one. You'd enjoy it.
Okay, well, we'll swing back at the end of the interview and ask you what your favorite books are. But I wanted to pick up on what you just said about NASA. You have a career with NASA. You were a superstar down there. So tell us about how you got to NASA and what what were some of your favorite moments?
It was absolutely wonderful. I don't think I could ever look back on my life and say I hadn't traveled or done amazing things with amazing people, because that's really what NASA is. So I landed there in 2003. To be honest with you, I left GSO, and I had been a satellite oceanographer in my time at GSO, and found a tenure track faculty position. And then the truth of the matter is, I lived in New Orleans, and my husband was still at GSO. He's a GSO alum as well. And September 11th happened, and we decided we were tired of flying across the country every other week to see each other, and we looked for jobs in the same place. He's an ocean policy person. He was an appointee under Barack Obama and is still a Washington, D.C. guy, and we both found jobs in Washington. And so I came to Washington. I started, I remember January 6, 2003, as a program manager in what's called ocean biology and biogeochemistry, which meant I was responsible for running an ocean research portfolio, as well as satellite missions that look at the oceans from space, particularly looking at the ocean biology and ecology. And I did that for a number of years. And then I was asked if I was interested in being, higher up the food chain. And I became deputy director of the Earth Science Division about 18 months before I left this past September. So I did that for almost 2 years. It was absolutely wonderful. I learned a ton. It was such a change in mental capacity, moving from just thinking about the oceans to thinking about the earth holistically. And then more importantly, how the earth and what we did scientifically and observationally fit in with planetary science, astrophysics, and heliophysics, which is what we do, the study of the sun and the surrounding atmosphere there. And so it was absolutely incredible. I got to do things like help select the instruments on the latest Mars rover. I got to train astronauts and teach them earth science and what they should be looking at or caring about as they look out the windows of the International Space Station. And just as the agency's mission changed, we changed as well and evolved in parallel. And it was an incredible ride. I've traveled everywhere. I've met lots of people, and it was a hard decision to leave, but I'm really glad to be back.
Did you, have you ever been to the International Space Station? Have you done any space exploration yourself?
No, I'm not an astronaut. My husband often jokes that I always said I'm not jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. So I applaud them immensely. They are an incredible group of people, the NASA Astronaut Corps. They are amazing. They are willing to explore the entire universe if it comes to that, and they have the opportunity. I have definitely trained some of the astronauts that have been on the International Space Station to look at Earth science, but I've never been there myself.
So how do you train an astronaut? What do you tell them to look for? And what's the coolest thing that they found and reported back to you that we would understand?
Yeah, so no, it's a
As
great
lay
question.
people.
So the mission of NASA had changed in the 18 years I was there, right? In 2004, the focus was on retiring this space shuttles, which many people are familiar with, right? Which facilitated human exploration for the agency for many, many decades. And then that morphed into wanting to reestablish humans on the surface of the moon, and then use that as like a springboard or a jumping off point to actually get to Mars and put people on Mars. And so in the early part of my tenure, that was the focus. And so it was like, okay, so what are the parallels between human exploration and earth science? And I, tailored my classes to focus on exploration in general, because what motivated humans to actually explore our home planet and actually take to the seas and find new lands actually also is what motivates us to just explore the universe itself. There's this human drive, this need from the time that we're babies to like pick up a rock and turn it over and see what's under there, right? And there's also this need to go to places that were largely unexplored, whether we're hiking, whether we're paddling our kayaks, whatever it is. People are always searching for something that maybe others have never seen. And the astronauts are the same way in the universe. I think from there, it sort of morphed into retiring the shuttle fleet, maybe revectoring the human exploration program a bit as the president's change and the executive branch shifts. And we started to think more about what we could use the International Space Station for scientifically with our international partners. And so often you can look at the Instagram feed from the International Space Station or just the photos that are posted online, and the astronauts will photograph phenomena like just the Grand Canyon and what it looks like from the International Space Station, or an algal bloom, which happens all over the world. They're all different colors depending on what's blooming. Or they'll photograph the wildfires that happen out west. And they'll say, these are the latest photos, hurricanes, snowstorms, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll send them back to NASA, and people will sort of write scientific commentary to go along with that. But it just shows our Earth as a very fragile and a very beautiful planet.
Well, what a cool way to write a report, right? So,
Yeah.
you have a very ponderous thesis, and you're able to spice it up with graphic and beautiful photos from the International Space Station. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
It's awesome.
So let's talk a little bit about the your tenure at NASA and since you are an oceanographer, what have you noticed, or what did you notice in the closing days of your career there about the state of our oceans?
So our oceans are changing. I mean, I think it's fairly well accepted now that Earth's climate is changing. People say to me, used to, I'd go to meetings or I'd go to do outreach, and people would say, God, we haven't had snow in the mid-Atlantic in so long, and the weather and the climate of the Earth is really shifting, and that is having impacts on everything land, ocean, and atmosphere, as well as the ice. We do use Earth observing satellites to study the ice as well. And one thing we see are warmer surface waters in the ocean, and what that means for changes in some of the local and global scale currents. We see changes in the ocean ecosystems. We see more intense, harmful algal blooms. We see changes in water quality. We see a lot of fishery species migrating northward and southward, or really poleward, to go to the waters that are more hospitable for them, which may have been off New England, but now are further north, off of the coast of Greenland and Canada. We're seeing those shifts, and we're trying to understand them real time. I look at those shifts as opportunity. Do we have ideas of how we could better regulate some of the drivers of that climate change? Are there technologies we could be developing that could help us in that capacity, or observationally? And there's a lot of opportunity out there. But first, I think we have to understand and protect our home planet, and make sure its resources are sustainable for future generations. Because it's not just about us, right? It's about our children and our children's children, and making sure that the Earth is definitely habitable for them in the long haul.
Mhm. What would you say to people who are doubters about climate change?
So it's really funny. I've had people who are what I would call skeptics, where they're not quite sure and they want to understand. And then I've had people who are flat out deniers, who look at it as their opinion, or my opinion, right? And what I say to them is, the analogy I like to use is, you have to ask yourself, if you go to the doctor each year for a physical, and why you do that. I go every year. I always have. I come from a solidly conservative family. They go every year, and they always have. And I ask my mom, why do you do that? And she goes, well, I have to know if something's wrong. And if I go every year, then they can compare that to the previous years, and I'll know. And I said, well, that's a good way of looking at it, because we do the same thing with the Earth, right? We can observe different properties of Earth's ocean, land, atmosphere, its ice, its solid Earth. And we can actually tell if there are changes. And sometimes, if we're lucky enough to conduct research, we can tease out from exploring our planet what those changes are and what's causing them. And I said, so if you find out your cholesterol is going up, what would you do? Oh, the doctor tells me to give up candy all the time. I said, okay. So if you just gave up candy and that didn't do it, maybe there's something else that you have to change that'll make you healthier. And I said, that is how we look at the Earth as well, right? We make all these observations so we can conduct analysis over time, which allows us to explore our Earth in the temporal dimension, but also allows us to notice any changes and try and figure out whether it's humans that are driving that, or whether it's something else that's causing that. And that's the only way that we can make sure that our resources are sustainable for future generations. So those observations, I always say the most unsexy thing to sell, right, is sustained time series observations. But when you string all that information together like you do in your physical, you can reveal some really interesting things about your body that is both, amazing and worrisome, and we can help control that in our Earth.
Mhm. Well, you are a student of this, so do you have any degree of optimism that we as a society, as a planet, can remedy some of the real challenges and problems and devastation that you've been able to see?
Yeah, I do. I'm always hopeful, right? I mean, it's always, you can think about any aspect of your life, and there's always time to change something, right? And you don't want to get past a tipping point where there's not. And so to me, I say, there are very clever, smart engineers and industry people out there who are dependent on our ocean for their livelihood. And if you were to tell them, if I were a business owner and you told me if I just changed X in my practices, probably that would mean, more sustained resources for the future and my business would stay around longer. Or if there were a way to sort of regulate some of what we were doing or manage some of what we were doing that's harmful to the ocean. And this gave me an opportunity to build new instruments to make those observations, or engage in research and development that the government was going to fund and that really fed into the livelihood of my business, I would engage right away, right? It's that fear of change. We have this way of denying things in our lives, and same with the earth, that we would just rather turn our head and think, oh, I have to change, my entire business to do that. And I'd say that's wrong. What you have to do is perhaps evolve your business and bring on, students that we train at the Graduate School of Oceanography, for example, with new skill sets that can really feed into the next phase of your business. Because it's as much in my interest as having those blue economies and those businesses stay around for future generations as it is to have the earth, right? This is a partnership, not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, so that's a great way to look at it in terms of, motivating people to understand over a period of time, what changes are taking place, and that certainly incremental, seemingly small incremental changes can have a big impact over time, just like a ship, right? Steering
Right.
a ship.
Exactly. Right. And it's important for people to realize that cause and effect, at the local scale and at the global scale. Because the other thing people ask me is, I'll do outreach and they'll say, oh my God, Paula, you've given us all this information. What can I do, to do it? Can I do anything that's going to affect everything? And you say, yes, of course, just think about the food you eat. Do you, I remember like vividly when I was a kid, when watermelon would show up on the shelf in the supermarket in the summer, and you were like, oh, it's watermelon season, and you would eat as much as you possibly could. And the same with strawberries and mangoes and all those things. And, maybe you got them for a little bit of time and that was just heaven. And now it's like our demand is that we need watermelon straight through the winter and we need strawberries straight through the winter. And it's nice to feed the industry that brings those in, but the footprint, of doing that from countries and areas that are so far away are probably offset a little bit by having the accessibility and the business there. And so, you just have to ask yourself, where's the sweet spot in that occasion, right? If we cut down to having that fresh watermelon in the grocery store 9 months a year instead of 12 months, would that be so important an offset for the health of the earth? And could I live without it for 3 months as a human? Yes, I could, right? So those small trades can go a really long way, right?
I don't think anybody would ever think of that as a concept. So give us a few more of your thoughts about
my bad ideas.
little tweaks that may have gone unnoticed.
Yeah, I mean, the same with recycling, right? Where people say, oh, I can't deal with recycling, like it's just too much. I mean, especially now in a time of COVID, right? Where people are ordering more online. We all have to. I mean, remember like at the start of this whole thing in March and April, where none of us could find well, where I lived in Washington, you could not find toilet paper or paper towels or bleach wipes or any of that stuff, right? And we were all looking online constantly for that. And so, I had neighbors who were like, I noticed we're throwing out like lots of boxes and things like that. And I said, if you just break these up and put them in your giant blue recycle bin, they'll take them away. And so some of my older neighbors, I think, had a hard time getting their heads around the giant blue recycle bin, right? And I said, I can, it's easy. I'll help you order one online. It'll be delivered. And let's just start with your boxes. Like, let's not put all the pressure on you to separate absolutely everything out, but let's start really simple. And you may be saying to yourself, like, oh my God, everybody recycles their boxes. And the truth of the matter is everybody doesn't, right? So all those boxes from Amazon or wherever you order your goods from are coming in and they're totally recyclable, right? So if we just started all small with that kind of bit of recycling, or buying trash bags that were better at breaking down rather than other kinds, they still would employ the plastics industry, but it would just be a slightly different combination that's a little bit
Yeah.
more environmentally friendly, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize that, they think they're being very responsible by recycling, and they pile up all their recycled items in a plastic bag and then
Mhm.
throw it in the recycling bin.
Mhm.
But those two concepts don't go together. So I'm interested in your advice on plastic bags that are more recyclable and stick
Yeah.
around a lot less time in the landfill.
Well, I'll tell you what we did. I mean, so we went recently and my husband and I crossed the line into using bags that are reusable, right? So it's not just about recycling, it's about reuse too. I mean, I have friends that go so far as to like clean all their aluminum foil, wash it, hang it up to dry, right? Same with their saran wrap or whatever is the brand you use of plastic wrap. And sometimes we don't go quite that far, especially if it's around, meat or raw fish or something like that. I mean, that you want to be very careful with. But I was surprised to see like how many products are out there that are really reusable. So you can put your meat, your fish, whatever, in a reusable bag. Just run it through the dishwasher on the top on the low setting. Pull it out and it's good to go the next time. And even though it took us a little bit of time to get our heads around, you know, putting meat in it, cleaning it, and using it again. Like that's all we do now, and we're buying goods still, but we are throwing a lot less trash out. And that was something we really felt strongly about trying to do this year. It's just producing less, right?
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean, I mean, I don't know that impacts the economy tremendously, because what the industry is doing is looking for, how do I make my products more sustainable? Because people genuinely want to buy sustainable products.
Mhm.
That's important. So
Mhm.
those trash bags that are made with recycled material or are more easily broken down in a landfill or otherwise, all of a sudden become really appealing, and they're fairly similar in cost to, what we would normally purchase. So that's nice, right? That just makes you feel like you're doing something.
Yeah. So what about your Gen Z students and graduate students? What is their perspective on all of this?
So at my age, I'm very far from Gen Z, the millennials, but their attitude, like I read this article in the New York Times yesterday, in the Sunday paper, and I was fascinated. It was about the redistribution of wealth and how all these young people in their 20s are inheriting money from their families. And they're trying to tilt the balance of rich and poor, right? They're reinvesting in sustainable businesses, and they're trying to close the gaps between rich and poor. And they're looking for businesses that want to produce sustainable products and are giving back to the earth. And they're not going out and buying lots of goods, which is like, I grew up with my parents wanting the house with the white picket fence. They were immigrants, right? This was the American dream. And what I love is that the American dream is still out there, but it's just evolved with a whole new way of thinking about our impact on the earth around us and how we make that better and different. And it doesn't mean there's any less opportunity out there, for scientists, for engineers, for students, for industry. You just have to think maybe a little bit differently than you used to, and that's kind of a cool idea about the evolution of our country.
Do you think it's generation specific based on the learnings that we've all had over the last few years?
I'm like, I guarantee you there are not, I would love to see the statistics on this, but I guarantee you there are not a lot of millennials online buying on Cyber Monday. You know what I mean? I think they just don't want stuff. And at first I'm like, they don't want stuff. Are they crazy? Like this is my grandmother's teapot. Like this was hers in the, late 19th century. And, it's just different, is my sense of it. I haven't studied it nearly as closely as I could or should, but it's funny. I will tell you this parallel with GSO is that when I started at NASA, almost 20 years ago, the holy grail was that you came to graduate school and then you landed in an academic tenure track faculty position and you became a faculty member, and that was the path. And now, 20 years later, these kids, and I don't mean to call them that, these students, they want to go out and they don't want the tenure track faculty position necessarily. They want to go into nonprofits, to NGOs, into industry and contribute to the sustainable products. They want to go and work for the World Bank and go directly into helping people, right? So whereas that basic research they were conducting and may have conducted as a tenure track faculty member is equally as important, they actually want to go directly into that profession, from what I've seen and sensed, that saves industry, saves the world, saves a generation, saves an economy, saves a local group of people who cannot otherwise attain resources to help themselves. And it's a really admirable shift. And so we ask ourselves at GSO, are we training students for these careers that they want? Are we working closely with Rhode Island businesses, right, to understand what kind of students they're looking for, what their next steps are, and that we have the appropriate classes in place to actually facilitate that.
If you're just joining us, we are talking to Dr. Paula Bontempi. She is the new dean of the Graduate School of Oceanography at the University of Rhode Island. She has a fascinating background, having spent a great deal of time at NASA before coming to the university as the dean. She is a graduate of the University of Rhode Island School of Oceanography, so it's a homecoming of sorts for Dean Bontempi. So let's talk a little bit more about your plans as the dean, and do you have any projects ongoing that would be specifically opportune for a linkage with the business community?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I just started the first week in September, and one of the things I've been trying to do is take the opportunity, like you have kindly offered me today, and just talk a little bit about what GSO and I am thinking about for the future, and reach out to industry, because I really want to hear from them. And I've done some one-on-ones with Raytheon, and I have a few more scheduled this week with Lockheed Martin. And other potential partners to find out, are we training students appropriately for future positions at certain types of industry, right? And it becomes really important to hear from local industry on a small scale and a large scale, what they're looking for, what types of students, what types of training, do they have employees that we could train here? What would that might look like? What classes are they interested in? What kind of backgrounds are they wanting to develop? And that's where we are right now. And so I would really welcome that kind of input. I think one thing we're going to start very soon in examining the academics at GSO is to do a survey of our existing students as well as our alumni, and just find out, how has your background at GSO and the classes that you've trained in served you in where you've wound up for your occupation? We've begun to design the same type of survey for our industry partners in the state to sort of reach out and say, what are you looking for in a future employee? And do we have the infrastructure here to actually supply that to you? And if we don't, what would it take to actually implement? Is it classes? Is it online learning? Is it different types of degree programs? We haven't done that here in quite a while, a number of decades. So I'm really curious to see how that turns out in the next 6 months.
Well, how would a business think about linking with the Graduate School of Oceanography and its students if the business itself wasn't specific to the oceans, as an example?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, we are ocean focused here, but the one thing that we have that's super unique at GSO is we have everything connected from ocean exploration through discovery and research straight into policy, decision support, and economics. And so, the Narragansett Bay sort of threads through the entire state. And if you have any business that is either on or dependent on the Narragansett Bay, then we would certainly love to hear from you. Or any other surrounding waters in the state, or even, in New England, because we are regional and we do have regional partners from Woods Hole to New Hampshire and then some, right? And so we work with those partners very closely, and we'd like to hear from those businesses. And I'd say I'd be happy to be contacted directly by any business that's interested in providing some feedback, some input, or just having an open dialogue. on potential collaboration opportunities between GSO and what's happening in the state of Rhode Island. I'd very much like to hear that feedback as to what they think we're doing right and perhaps what we could be doing differently.
Yeah, I think everybody's looking for a way to, like, expand their mind and say, okay, well, it may not seem like an obvious fit, but like a random collision with an oceanographer or someone who is skilled in thinking that way could be an interesting juxtaposition for anybody that is, want to think about the Narragansett Bay and its role as an economic development generator, not just for our society, but also as an individual business. So I know one thing that everybody is looking forward to, particularly University of Rhode Island President David Dooley, is the imminent arrival of the big ship. So tell us about that.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So I credit my predecessor, Dr. Bruce Corliss, with working with partners and those at GSO to winning the regional class research vessel that's coming online. It is currently being built in Louisiana, and it should be here sometime in the first part of 2023 calendar, is my understanding. And so while the Endeavor is near and dear to everybody's heart, it's a wonderful ship. It is still a fantastic resource for the state, for the school, and all of the regional partners. It's probably time to think about its retirement. And I know the crew are extremely excited to have the new regional class research vessel coming online. So it's at the point where pretty soon I think we'll start talking about what the ship should look like, what kind of research we'd like to undertake on the ship, how we design the laboratories and the deck space. We have a model of it in the lobby here in the OSEC building on the Bay Campus. It's open to the public, so anybody can come in and look at it. It's kind of fascinating. It's just one idea of how the ship might be laid out. The other thing we have underway, thanks to the first bond, is that we are going to compete the opportunity for the pier sometime next year. And we'll have that open competition, and then the pier will be built hopefully sometime in 21, 22 timeframe and be completed by then. So that's really exciting, to see those architectural plans and development for the infrastructure, to actually see the ship and hear about it weekly being developed and designed. And then once it hits the water and begins its journey to its new home here at GSO, we'll be really excited to welcome it. And it will open up whole new avenues of research for GSO.
Yeah, I imagine that this is a really exciting development for attracting potential students and faculty to have this brand new shiny research vessel that's, the best of the best anywhere in the world.
Yeah, no, what's really cool about GSO is it's one of the schools that moors the ship literally right out the window, right? So in a lot of places you have to travel, they'll have their own ship, but they won't literally have it right off the pier, right off the campus. Yeah. But GSO does, so I can look out my window and there it is, right? And when it's gone, it's gone. And when it comes in, you see it come up the Narragansett Bay and turn around and come back and moor itself at the pier. And it's just like incredible. I know that there's a future in uncrewed vessels and why that is, but if you've never gone out to sea on a research vessel, and we tend to romanticize it, a lot of us still would get seasick, I'm sure. It's just so moving, right? And what's really cool about that kind of facility is that the crew becomes scientists and the scientists become crew, and there's sort of this like camaraderie that happens and everybody gets to know each other, whether you're out for a week or a month or longer. And, everybody learns about what happens on the ship and everybody learns about what happens on the ocean. And it's just a really unique experiential learning facility.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever open up those cruises, those research opportunities to members of the lay community, as an example?
Yes. So my understanding, and again, only here a couple of months, is that there is the Rhode Island Endeavor program where we take students and teachers to sea every year. We haven't been able to do it in a time of COVID, but it's an open program and people come in and they can sort of compete for the opportunity to go out to sea on the Endeavor and do some research and learn a little bit about the ocean. I know that they've taken local weather people out to do the weather every night from the deck, somewhere offshore. there are all these cool opportunities that are available to people at all, and students at all levels. I think they've taken high school students out. I think they've taken undergraduates out many times. And you really learn by doing, right?
Right.
You can read a book or sit in a class on the ocean and how it works, but if you actually go out and make the measurements and see the data come in, it's so much more valuable.
Yeah, it leaves an indelible impression.
It really
I've
does.
spent- yeah, one of my favorite places is the School of Oceanography Library on the Bay Campus. I've spent a lot of time there just because I really enjoy the surroundings and, looking out, panoramically at the bay. And it's just sort of like, good way to focus and, get into a different vibe, if you will, and just feel inspired in a way that you don't feel when you're in your usual location. So I would commend that idea to anybody, but certainly not now. We have to wait until the pandemic is over.
Yes.
What have you observed about Narragansett Bay, Dr. Bontempi, since your return? You were away for 20 plus years. You were a student of Narragansett Bay. Before that, you come back, and is there anything that you noticed that really jumped out at you as like, wow, since I've been gone, this happened?
Yeah. It's a great question. So I'll tell you this, I haven't been back really long enough, and I came back in September, which for me, the water was still really warm, but to a lot of people, they're like, I can't believe you're swimming in that. So I have definitely noticed it is warmer way later in the year here than I ever remember. I mean, I think it's supposed to be 61 degrees today, and we're at November 30th. Like, I remember by now, it was gray, it was cold, there were no flowering plants. And the development is the other thing I've noticed. There are still certain areas that are like the buildings are exactly the same. I used to stand on the Canals Quadrangle and look out over the bay, and some of the same buildings are in the same place, but there's a lot more development along the bay than I remember. Houses and businesses and things like that. And so, those two things really struck me. And it's a great question because 20 years is enough to really notice dramatic change when you come back. And my husband too said the same thing. Like, I can't believe it's 60 degrees out today. By now, like, we just have this recollection of the area being cold and gray and everybody's staying home by now. So it's nice to see people out and about. It also suggests, that businesses are staying open a lot later in the year, and there's opportunity there, right? But the bay itself, looks the same. I haven't gotten a chance to really spend a year here yet, right, where I see if the ctenophores are blooming at some point, and the animals come and go, and the shifts that I remember when you used to go swimming in the summer. I'm looking forward to experiencing all of that next year.
You know what I notice? A lot more surfers.
Yes. Yep. I think the water's a little bit warmer. I mean, I remember when you used to go surfing in the summer here, it was cold. People there weren't lots and lots of surfers, and now it's like everybody's out there with a longboard trying to learn, which is awesome.
It's very hard. It's very humbling.
Yeah.
It's very humbling to try to stand up.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not good at it. I admit it.
Yeah. Well, I'm determined that I'm going to stand up at some point. I got the wetsuit and I've got the training, but there's no way that I can stand up just yet, but I'm going to keep trying. And, I have gone in the water, like in late October with a wetsuit, and marveled at how beautiful it is, and had this romantic notion that I was going to do it like every weekend. But alas, it seems a little bit out of reach for me at this point.
Yeah, I was wondering if they still do like the polar plunge. They used to do that, and I wonder how cold it'll be if they do it this year. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, well, that never really interested me because it just seemed too extreme. You need a wetsuit for this kind of activity.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
We only have a few minutes left, and I do want to get back to some of your fundraising objectives as an example. How can the business community help you with that?
Oh, thank you for asking that. So I understand that the next bond will likely be in 2022 or somewhere thereabout for the phase 2 part of the campus revitalization. And I applaud the school, my predecessor, Bruce Corliss, and the engineering team for really thinking about the design of the campus very organically. One of the things that's really interesting is that they are starting to flesh out what certain buildings would be used for and the facilities that'll be there. And one of the things we really want to do is make sure a lot of those facilities are open to the public. So you can, one thing I love about the Bay campus is the public really owns this campus. People are constantly like walking their dogs and peeking in windows and looking at things and wanting to know what we're doing. And I love that they have an interest. And so it would be really nice to hear from the businesses, like whether there's a type of facility we should be developing. Like we're working on the Ocean Technology Building right now, which will have a huge tank for experimental robotics and instruments and things like that. And I'd like it to have a viewing platform. But if there were, an industry partner that would say like, well, instead of making the tank, this size and this deep, if you guys did X, we could come and use it as a test facility. Like that's the kind of information I think we would really welcome from here on out. I would love for industry to say, well, if you guys would hire a professor in X, right, we would be thrilled for them to train students that we would, potentially hire in the future. So there's opportunities for things like endowed fellowships, endowed professorships. I want to make sure that we are partnering closely with industry to try and accommodate and train people for what they're looking for down the road, right? So how we do that is more than just, hey, I'd like my name on a building, right? I want them to be real partners in GSO, that we're here to support them and they're there to support us. And I want to make sure that all feeds back to the state of Rhode Island. And the other thing, I feel very strongly about is we carved out some money to do an opportunity to bring on 3 graduate students beginning next year that are specifically targeting historically excluded groups and bringing in people from demographics that may not necessarily have the opportunity to go to graduate school, but have a huge interest, right? That the ocean is part of who they are. They want to learn more. They want to be part of the GSO family. I want to make sure that we create the opportunity to bring them in, not just in the recruitment, but in the retention. And that we've got the faculty here and the infrastructure to support them. So there's a lot of potential there for industry partnerships. As I said, not just in putting your name on a building or a state-of-the-art classroom, which is always welcome, but in actually helping us to design the next 60 years of our future.
People might be thinking, hey, that sounds really interesting to be part of the GSO family, but I don't have an undergraduate degree in oceanography. Does that matter?
Not necessarily. It really depends on what you want to do. I've often said, especially at a place like NASA, I knew engineers that had bachelor's degrees with decades of experience that you could give me 10 of your best PhDs and they would run circles around them. There are people like my parents didn't really go to college, right? And they were highly trained, in both in math fields. And so, I think you're really good and drawn to the things that you are. And I think there are different ways that we can facilitate that in different people. The students here are all, for the most part, graduate students. So that implies that, yes, you have to have an undergraduate degree. But we also take on a host of undergraduates during a summer program, people who have an interest in ocean science or marine science who don't necessarily have a background in it, to sort of explore, is it for them? So there's opportunity for lots of people with different backgrounds in ocean science here.
So we should get everyone excited about championing the bond issues that the next set of bond issues.
Yes, please. That's a big one. Yeah, I sort of am out there over the next couple of months creating what I call 2 traveling roadshows. One is about what we'd like to build facility-wise with our partners in ocean engineering and the College of Engineering, our partners in the EPA and NOAA across the street, and some of the other affiliations on campus, and what that means for the state of Rhode Island, as well as the global scale research that we do here, and what that means for the planet. And I've been working on that with the faculty to sort of say, it's hard for voters to come to the booth, right? And read the referendum and go, I don't know what this means for me, right? So what I'd like to do is create sort of the short traveling road show that connects people with what we're going to do here and how that's going to feed back to Rhode Island.
Mhm.
And I think that will be important.
If visitors were to drive down to the Bay Campus today, would they see anything really cool and anything going up or any way to engage?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So they would see Endeavor, who's home for the winter here, and they would start to see and what's starting to be markings all over the campus of boreholes and things like that, starting to get ready for some of the new facilities that we'd like to build. And what's really cool, and I was just talking to some of the staff about this in facilities, is that so GSO has this like funny, the land has this like long history of different things that are like rumored to be under GSO, like a whole series of tunnels, and there are bunkers here, and there are, you know, the routings for submarine nets and things like that that come from the history of Rhode Island. And so I think they were doing their first bit of boreholing,
Yeah.
and they came across a piece of like clay pipe, and they brought it up, and they were like, oh my God, we found this clay pipe. What are we going to do with this? I said, hold it. You know what we're going to do with that?
Yeah.
So we're going to put up like a display plaque of things that as we excavate, you know, we find that's part of Rhode Island's history. And when is it from? You know, so if you were walking around the campus, you would be like, oh, what's this? You know, and it'd be a sign about not only where the clay pipe came from, but what the facility is going to be that we're going to build there. Right. And what else we might find. I mean, that's important to connect people with the land here, right? With the school and everything that we're thinking about. And so we're just starting to mark up the area that way. We're just starting to figure out what we're going to do with the new marine operations building. And I think people will start to see the front end of what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Well, Rhode Island had a long, strong, proud history of having, protecting the coast and having certain features along Narragansett, certain rock formations and promontories, looking out for enemies and using our submarine capabilities, and just being a place where there was very vigilant during the wartime.
Mm-hmm. You are the ocean state, right? I mean, there's a long history there that's really important, and more importantly, a really long future that I look forward to being a part of. And that's going to be exciting for GSO.
What are your thoughts about the ocean engineering building? I know we touched upon that a little bit, with the testing pools and everything, but I haven't been in that building in a while, but I knew that it was a perfect candidate for some additional upgrades.
Yeah, no, we are talking right now. Like I said, that this is like the exciting part, right? We're having like many weekly meetings each week about the ocean technology building, the ocean engineering buildings. Like, what could we do with them? How could we revector things to make the space more friendly to like incubator opportunities with industry partners? What might those facilities look like? What should they contain? And we are literally actively in those conversations as we speak. So this is fortuitous timing, because I think if any industry partners out there are like, could you guys build this? You know, it's possible that we could accommodate a change in the structure of something if it would benefit an industry partner and they would actually use the facility. And we are definitely open to that dialogue right now. And so, yeah, I mean, all of the engineering side, and they're phenomenal partners in the College of Engineering and Ocean Engineering. You know, Ray Wright and his team are fantastic. And we've been thinking collectively about how to best utilize that space, not just for ocean research, but for ocean technology development as well.
Fantastic. Well, you are so full of ideas and, ways to partner and innovate, and you're painting a really amazing picture of how the university can go to the next level, and potentially using the new ship as the springboard, and just, doubling down on all the amazing work and reputation of the School of Oceanography, which I have to point out is nationally ranked, internationally known as well. So you're taking over at a wonderful and very opportune time. So wanted to just conclude the interview by asking you a question based on where we started. You talked about The Hidden Life of Trees as a formative book for you, but people listening to this interview that might want to, have a more high-minded understanding of the planet and the things that you see as a trained scientist. What are your favorite books?
So this is so NASA centric. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to say it. So NASA has two books we did about the Earth. One is called The Earth, and the other is called Earth at Night. Now, the reason I point you to those is because what they are like coffee table books, right? They're about what we can see from space on a local and global scale, and then with a short blurb about what you're looking at. So if you are not like a chapter book person and you need photos to sort of demonstrate it, and I can tell you that satellite imagery, as the one behind me, is almost irreplaceable as a teaching tool. You can look at different areas of the world and read about those, and actually learn something about what you're looking at. So when you see a phenomenon real time, you can say, oh my gosh, I know what that is. That's this type of cloud. That's this type of tree, this type of field, this type of shrub. This is what's happening in the ocean. As a reader, you will laugh, like, especially with COVID, like my nightstand is just full of books. And my husband has had an influence on me. I've started reading more science fiction, which I was not ever. I can tell you, I was not ever a sci-fi reader. And he's like a classic sci-fi guy. So I have that. Hidden Life of Trees is one I read earlier this summer. I also have a thing, this is embarrassing, for octopuses. And I just picked up a couple of books at Barnes and Noble online about like the lives and the life cycle of octopuses that are more like, novels than they are nonfiction, but it's like, a little bit fictionalized. Yeah, so those are the ones that like jump out at me. I also have a good friend that wrote a self-help book in her copious spare time during COVID that she just sent to me that I promised her I would read as well.
What's the name of it?
Oh gosh, it's like I'll send it to you. It's like how to supercharge your own life kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
One of those, and she is such a dynamic, amazing speaker. And so she's fantastic. Her name is Kat Shalhoub, and she's fantastic. So
Fantastic.
anyway.
All right. Well, we'll give her a shout out and encourage everyone to check out that book and pick up some of the things that you suggest. I think people are, in this time of seclusion and pandemic and being, hemmed in and isolated and, can't explore anything. They're dying to think about ways that they can, do something that's the polar opposite of that, which may be expanding their mind by looking at satellite imagery and the planet as a whole and space. And what's your favorite app?
Oh, let's see. My favorite app, boy. So I have to say, like, I'm on Twitter and Instagram a lot, and I spend a lot of time looking at what other people are posting and finding. There is an app, God, I don't know if I have the upgrade of it, that was developed by a group at NASA that allows you to sort of take optical information of the water. So you sort of would take your phone and you would point it at the water, and the camera has enough information contained in it when you take a photograph to actually tell you what might be in the water optically, based on the color of the water, which is really cool. Yeah, so there are a couple out there that I think are interesting, but I mostly like to follow the news and see what other people are doing. And I think it's hard in a time of COVID to like not constantly be online for work as well as play, but just simple things like that get you to start thinking about things differently, I think can be really fun.
Thinking at a higher level and sort of, changing
like
up
your role in the world, right? Some people, especially, well, I'd say this about COVID, like the very thing I think that isolates us also connects us. So if you're feeling or learning something, chances are somebody else is noticing it as well. And that's, I think, why I've taken so much to Twitter and Instagram, because I've noticed how many other people are noticing things like I am. And you just have that instant connection. And I think that's important.
Well, we are so fortunate to have you as part of our community, Dean Bontempi. It's been so great to chat with you. Is there anything that you want to leave us with? Anything that we didn't touch on?
No.
For our listeners and our viewers to ponder?
No, we've covered a lot, and I've really appreciated the opportunity and the discussion and the dialogue. And I just want to thank everybody for listening and just see the world as our climate, our earth as opportunity, and not as something that will destroy your way of life if we change it, right? Americans are brilliant people. We are a land of opportunity. And I think there's a lot out there, especially in partnership for GSO and a lot of the Rhode Island businesses. So thank you for that.
Okay, well, please come back to us soon and let us know what you're
Sure.
working on and how we can help. And we look forward to bringing our business and industry connections to you and to the university so that we can continue to help the GSO shine both nationally and internationally. So thank you again, and we'll see everybody next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.